of the Colleton County coroner who called MUSC Forensic Pathology requesting autopsies on 2 individuals that died under his jurisdiction. I was not asked by the prosecution to perform an autopsy. It was an independent autopsy.
Your autopsy is independent. You're not hired by the prosecution or law enforcement or anything like that?
No, it's just at the request of the coroner.
All right. You've had a chance to hear the testimony of the pathologist for the defense that testified yesterday?
Yes.
All right. I want to ask you a couple of general questions and then move specifically to some of the conclusions that individual reached. But just very quickly, with skin tags, can you tell me the reliability of that in determining directionality just as a general matter?
Yeah, well, you know, we look at these things, but just like every other thing at, you know, finding at the autopsy, we take it in the context. So sometimes skin tags support your findings, and sometimes they're not really so reliable. So, you know, skin tags don't tell you necessarily the direction of a wound, especially going through very soft tissue.
All right. And I'm going to show you a couple of exhibits that have been previously introduced in this particular case. I'm going to try to be very careful with these. I'm going to show you what's been marked as exhibits, defense exhibits 159, 160, and 161. And if you could take those out and just tell me if you recognize those. And again, please be mindful of the direction in which those images are presented. Excuse me. I'm sorry.
Yes, I've seen these.
All right. And what are those images of?
They're autopsy photographs of Maggie.
All right. You heard the testimony of the defense pathologist who testified yesterday that the directionality of the injury to the side of Maggie's head with the associated injury to the breast and the abrasion actually was coming from the top down as opposed, and I say top down as if somebody's standing upright, as opposed from going towards the bottom of the body up, correct?
Yes, that's right.
All right. And can you please look at the images that you have and explain to the jury your conclusions and why that defense pathologist is incorrect, who didn't conduct the autopsy to begin with, why he's incorrect.
Okay. Well, do you want me to show the photos?
You can, and let's just go ahead and put them up on the screen. So I'll take them. And if you could step down, please, if that's okay with your arm. And first, I'm going to show defense exhibit 160. Are we secure? We're good? All right. All right, and that's defense 160. And Dr. Riemer, if you can again explain to me your specific findings and how they relate to the testimony from yesterday.
Yes. So we have the abrasion on the left shoulder, clavicle area, and then we have an entrance defect in this left side of the face. We can see a hole there. It's a hole. And there was a defect in the left temporal lobe of the brain, which was included in my autopsy report. That could only have happened from that being an entrance wound.
Okay. And you mentioned during your testimony the concept of a diastatic fracture. Does that in any way relate to your conclusion in this regard?
Yeah, well, a diastatic fracture is when there's a separation of skull bones along suture lines which solidify during childhood. And usually it takes a lot of intracranial pressure to fracture the skull along the suture line.
All right. And does that relate to the conclusion that this had to be an entry wound?
Yeah, well, that's a finding. That doesn't prove that this is an entrance wound, but what I do, I have a path through the left temporal lobe, and there's, you know, that it was associated with the diastatic fracture because of the increased pressure.
All right, and one of the things you're telling this jury is you who actually,
Objection leading.
were you actually able to observe a hole associated with an entry wound when you physically performed this autopsy?
Yes, I physically performed the autopsy, and the way I determine direction is I have a hole below the left ear, which went into the brain, and so that's not going to happen in the opposite direction. And I understand that people can look at pictures, that's like a two-dimensional view, but doing the autopsy makes certain information available to the pathologist that is not available to an individual not performing the autopsy. And I had that information in my report, which was not, which was, I guess, overlooked.
Overlooked by the defense
Right.
pathologist?
Yes, I'm sure.
All right. I'm going to show you now Defense Exhibit 161. And there was some testimony from the defense pathologist about trying to determine directionality from this particular image. And can you please tell the jury why that pathologist is wrong?
All right. Well, when we have tears of the skin, and this is a lot of tears of the subcutaneous tissue, especially in a very soft area of the body where there's a lot of fat. There's a lot of stretching, and it doesn't necessarily, we can move the tissue of the breast, and sort of, you can even get the points to go into a different direction. This is not very impressive. It's not even really worth observing any of the skin tags. It's really very non-specific, and I think he has a very good imagination for for seeing that in this photo. And it's, skin tags can be there. Sometimes they support your findings, sometimes they don't support, but they don't take the place of determining the path of the wound by actually following it through the body.
I'll show you finally what's been marked as Defense 159, and is this also a representation, sort of the hole that you determined and were able to physically observe as a entrance wound on the side of Maggie's head?
Yes.
All right, let's talk a little bit about Paul. And you heard the defense pathologist and their subsequent expert talk about there being a contact wound to the top of Paul's head. Is that correct?
That's what he said.
All right. And you, of course, have already testified during your direct testimony that there's no way for this to be a contact wound, but now you have specific observations about the defense conclusions.
Well, I didn't think it was necessary for me to point out every physical feature of the wound that demonstrates that the entrance was to the top of the left shoulder and then went into the left side of the head before exiting the top of the head. Now, before I go on, I do want to say that I agree with the book that keeps being brought up, that when there is a contact shotgun wound to the head, there's massive gas expansion within the cranial cavity, within the skull. And what that does, it doesn't just create a hole with some, bones. I understand this was like the most severe thing you have ever seen. And you probably can't imagine that the damage to the head could be any worse. But a contact shotgun wound to the head with the associated gas expansion to the skull would not have, his face was basically intact. We would have had tears of the skin, and his eyes would have been either displaced from the orbital bones. The orbital bones were intact. Anytime there's massive gas buildup within the cranial cavity from a contact shotgun wound to the head, which the book does say is when we have the worst gas expansion, the entire face, he would have not even had a face left. I mean, I know what you saw was awful, and it was absolutely awful, but the damage would have been a lot worse. he would have had, like, the sides of his head would have down, and he would have had, his entire face would have been split open, because there's no way all of that gas expansion could occur and not cause fractures of these delicate bones in the face. His forehead was even still there. So, I agree with the book that a contact shotgun wound would cause severe gas expansion and damage to the head. What we have here is not consistent with a contact shotgun wound to the head. Damage to the head would have been much worse, even though this was already horrible. Okay, that being said, there are photographs. Okay.
Yep, and I'm going to put up what's already been admitted into evidence as States 486. And if you could, Doctor, just talk a little bit about this image as it illustrates what you're talking about with the face, but also, if you could, we'll go ahead and talk about with the face, and then I want to talk about the shoulder a little bit as well.
There's no skin, like, torn apart of his face. His eyes are still in the correct locations. It's hard to imagine that, anything could be worse than a hole at the top right side of the back of the head. But in my 20-plus years of experience doing autopsies and seeing contact shotgun wounds to the head, which are associated with massive gas expansion in the skull, this entire face, he would have had tears, the eyes would have been either hanging down or lost, blown out. There's no way that these features are consistent with a contact shotgun wound to the head.
All right. Now, there was some discussion by the defense pathologist about shaving the top of the head for stippling or checking for stippling. And can you comment on the necessity of that in your actual autopsy that you conducted?
Okay. So, he also said that sometimes we actually don't see the soot. Like he said, if Dr. Riemer shaved the area, she would have had the opportunity to see the soot. So suppose I didn't see soot, or I did see soot. First of all, I'm confident there would not have been soot, because the features of this wound are not consistent with a shotgun wound to that location. First of all, the damage to the head and face would have been far more severe than it was. And then also, the wounds to the shoulder and left side of the cheek have all the features of entrance wounds.
All right. And one of the things discussed by the defense experts was sort of the large sort of oblong shape of the shoulder. Can you explain how that does not contradict your findings of that shot coming this way, that we see this injury here? And I'm going to actually put up Defense Exhibit 162 to illustrate what we're talking about.
All right. Well, so we've got basically an oblong wound here, and that's because the wound is entering at an angle along the top of the shoulder. It's not hitting the shoulder at a perpendicular angle. So it's kind of grazing along the top of the shoulder. Okay, now is this, okay. So, and actually, he said that the pellets are going down. Okay, well, if you look at it as an entrance wound, they're actually going up. So it depends where you're looking at it from. If he's thinking that this is an exit wound, that this is, that the end of the wound path, then it would look to him as if the pellets are going down. But we can see this is actually an entrance wound for a few reasons. First of all, if it were an exit wound, do you remember all those pellet exit wounds on Paul's left arm that came from the chest? The pellets are not just going to stop in the shoulder. There's like no resistance there. The pellets are going to continue going until they exit the left side of the arm. Okay, so they don't just stop there. The reason they're there is that's because they started there. Okay. In addition, you see all of this white material here on the edge of the entrance wound. That's styrofoam packing material that's between the pellets. So the pellets are contained within wadding, and there's styrofoam packing material between. And that would never have been deposited there. So I did not think it was when I was telling you the direction, my determination of the direction of this wound. I did not have to necessarily, it was my expert, I'm an expert at determining forensic pathology includes establishing the direction of wounds. And because of all of these things, this was my determination. Okay, now there's another feature of this photograph. Do you see that this is coming into the left side of the, this is what I determined, left side of the cheek, and we've got all sorts of abrasions around here. Now, it doesn't have the classic, what we saw on Paul's chest had those little petals, so we knew that the wadding was starting to open up. But in this case, there was wadding that was probably open as well, so we have some pellets already starting to come out. It's not entering within the wadding, but the wadding is going along and entering them. And we have all this abrasion around the left side of the chin neck area. And that's consistent with, we're not going to have that abrasion if it's coming out. It's going to push the skin out. We're not going to have an abrasion. So, all that but even just common sense, we have that styrofoam packing material on the outside of the arm. My determination, this went up through the left cheek, out the right side of the top of the head. If it were a shotgun entrance wound, contact to the head, I don't care whether, there's no way his entire facial bones and skin, his ears would have been flopped down. There's so much gas expansion that the damage to his head would have been much worse. So that's based on my experience for doing this. And, I just don't know how, I didn't mention that styrofoam packing, but that's from when the pellets are coming in. And he said, oh, you can see they're going down. That's because he's looking from above. So but if you look at where I believed and I determined by doing this autopsy that the entrance wound is, it's actually going upward. So it depends which side of the pellets you're looking at. And if just logically, if this was an exit, the pellets wouldn't have just stopped there. They've got a huge amount of energy. They're going to continue through the arm and have individual pellets. They wouldn't have all just been concentrated right there. So, we can use our powers of logic, which I think, we all have, to understand how this is an entrance wound that exited the right side of the top of the head.
Dr. Riemer, having specifically, and you can take a seat now, thank you very much. Having specifically addressed the specific criticisms of the defense pathologist, in your expert opinion, having actually done the autopsies in this case, is there any way that could have been a contact wound to the top of the head?
No.
All right. And having addressed the specific concerns of the and testimony of the defense pathologist as it relates to Maggie, is your conclusion still that the shot went in the direction as you described before this
Yes,
period?
I disagree with his conclusions.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Riemer. Please answer any questions the defense counsel may have.
Dr. Riemer, good to see you again.
Hello.
So, you took pictures, correct?
I took pictures. I wish I took more pictures now, but I took pictures.
I'm sorry.
Yes, I wish I took even more pictures.
So do we. So, you made notes, which you converted into an autopsy
Yeah,
report.
it's a standard operating procedure.
Yeah, no. But so, and that's done so that somebody else can look at your work and see if they agree or disagree with you. Because
No, the notes are a work product for me while I'm preparing, doing my examination. I don't always, I take notes, I write numbers, but that is really for me so I can incorporate findings into an autopsy report that I'm going to write. And I don't write it the same while I'm at the table. I need to go away. Maybe I'm going to do it the next day, that night. So, but it's not done. People say, oh, can I have a copy of the autopsy diagram? Well, these are not autopsy diagrams that are meant for other people to look at, and sometimes they're not even completely accurate because I mark things on the outside of the body that later on during the course of the autopsy I determine, I'm like, oh, well, that's what that is, and it may not be what I initially wrote down. But by the time the autopsy's over, I've put it all together, and that a diagram or notes do not necessarily reflect everything, that I concluded.
Do you still have your notes in this case?
I imagine they would be in the file, but as I told you, this is, my notes are not necessarily the conclusion that I came to.
Did you produce them to the state?
I don't know what I did. I personally, yeah, if they were asked for, I'm sure I did.
Did you produce them to us?
No, I don't remember producing them at all. I don't have a request for those notes in my file.
But those notes would be your present sense impression as you're doing the autopsy, correct?
Well, they can have a lot of things written down on them.
But we don't know because we didn't get them, right?
Well, they're not important. What's important is they're my notes. They're for me. They're an aid to the pathologist. So even if I thought something initially, and then while I do the autopsy, by the time I get to the end, it could disagree. I don't necessarily go back and change the diagram. It's my work product. It's for me to aid me in writing my autopsy report. It's not for public view. It's not a.
Okay, so you just go with your report.
Well, I reviewed my report, correct.
Right, but you don't go back and look at your notes.
No.
So let me ask you some basic questions here. You've previously testified that the muzzle of the shotgun for this wound here that goes through his neck and out the top of his head was about 3 feet away.
That would be about right.
Okay. Now, you're familiar with this page from, I believe you've described it.
Oh, yes, I've seen it many times.
Okay. And as you see, the gas comes out, right, in the first shot, the top
Yes.
shot. And then actually there's sort of a blowback of gas as as we can see right here, the projectile, which is the pellets, are extruded from the barrel, right? I mean, the gas pushes the pellets out.
Well, there's gas expansion, and that helps propel the pellets, yes. I agree with the book. This was not a contact shotgun wound to the top of the head.
Okay, well, the book doesn't say that, but what the book does say is that as the pellets come out, at some point they begin to, the container opens and the pellets expand or move out in a pattern, a circular pattern. It becomes bigger as the further away you get, correct?
Yes, and that's what we have here.
Okay,
But this is actually demonstrating specifically a contact shotgun wound to head. But we do have splaying outward of the pellets. We can see on the left shoulder, they're fairly clustered together because they're first starting to be released from the wadding. And they did spread out. We have some of them down in the neck, some of them in the brain, and so they are spreading out. I don't see how, yes, it's a respected treatise, but this is specific to a contact shotgun wound to head. This is what this is describing.
Really?
Well, it's fine, it doesn't matter. I can look at my photos. I can look, if you're going to talk about theory, the photos.
Doctor, Your Honor, I would ask you to tell the witness to be responsive. She is going on a diatribe. Excuse me. I'm asking the court to instruct her to answer the question as specifically as she can. she goes off on tangents, and I'm sorry.
Harper, you may continue answering the question.
You remember what the question was?
No, that's your question.
Is this series of shots from the book depicting a contact wound? I think that's what I understood.
Yes.
Yes, okay. So where, if you step down here, show me, please, where the contact is with the body or the head. Here, let me give you this pointer.
Well, the contact would be at the first area.
Right here?
Yes.
Well, what's it contacting?
It's not, it's just a theoretical depiction. It's a theoretical
Is that what the book
depiction.
says?
Yeah. Well, go ahead. I don't recall the exact. Why don't you read it to me?
Well, why don't you tell me, is that a contact wound?
I don't know what this is. This is.
That's a shotgun.
That's a shotgun.
That's a shotgun being fired. Those are the pellets coming out.
Object
Those are the
counsel
pellets.
testifying.
Yeah, I think, this is a book, showing, the series of steps after a shotgun is fired.
If
But
this-
it has nothing to do with what I found in the body and does not help me determine the direction of the wound.
All right, so.
And I'm not going to describe to you, you can read it in the book. I don't remember how he says all of this.
The book isn't testifying, you are. You've testified that depicts a contact wound, yes?
Well, I don't know what this is depicting. It could be that this is a contact wound. I don't know where you're going with this.
Here's I'm going. Is that barrel in contact with anything?
It's not in contact with anything. It looks like it's just blowing into the air.
Okay, and you've been, that's fine. And your testimony is that barrel is at least 3 feet away from Paul's shoulder, is that correct?
It could be, depending on the weapon, it could be, it's not closer than 2 feet because we don't have the slip ring. But we
No
do
slip.
have packing material.
Okay, so as we see here, these pellets are beginning to separate. Is it your testimony that those pellets had separated when they hit Paul's shoulder at all?
They are starting to separate. We don't have the complete, widening of it. They're still relatively clustered together, but they're not as close as they would be if they were still contained within the wadding.
Okay, now, at 2 feet, is there any gas left, or is it all dissipated like this picture shows?
Well, what we have here, if there was more gas, if there was a contact wound to here.
It's not a contact wound.
I understand. The gas, you're wanting me to say yes or no, and
Yes
I
or no.
can't because I have the knowledge to explain how this relates to examining the body.
Okay,
I
so-
don't give theoretical talks or, I don't start looking up in this book while I'm doing an autopsy. I use my practical reasoning and my experience and knowledge of things.
If there'd been gas in the wound, or when it hit his shoulder or his neck, would you expect to find some physical manifestation of that?
Well, there would have been, a lot more expansion, shoulder expansion. This was fairly contained on the
So
left shoulder.
your testimony is there would have been little or no gas going to his shoulder, to his neck?
Well, there is always some gas, but it's not the kind of gas that we get in a contact shotgun.
Exactly. So, and you can go ahead and take the standing inquiry. Sorry, it's going to take a minute to get, no, not that one. Paul. Paul, when that one was.
I don't remember the number off the top of my head. It'll be over there somewhere. 160 something, I think.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have you go to the jury room for a break. Please do not discuss the case. down. Please do not discuss your testimony with anyone. It'll take about 10 minutes.
All rise and come to order. Quiet. Be seated.
You may bring the jury.
Jury is present, sir.
All right, you may continue.
Oh, I know. I'm sorry. I got it right here. So these guys first. We have our idea. Doctor, I'd ask you to look at this photo and tell me if this is one of the photos from your autopsy.
Yes,
Okay, that's all I need. Thank you. Now, I'd offer this defense exhibit number 195 into evidence, please.
No objection, Your Honor.
Admit it.
So can we put that up on the screen, please? Before I lose it, let me hand this to. Thank you. So, what are we looking at here?
do you want me to come? Oh, here it is.
No, just tell me what it is.
Yeah, okay. So this is an entrance shotgun wound to the left shoulder area.
Okay, and you a moment ago said something about packing material. What is packing material?
Yes. So there's foam that is frequently within, between
I'm
pellets.
sorry, just a moment. Your Honor, I can't hear her because of the noise coming through the door. I apologize, but I just need to understand what she's saying. I apologize. May I begin?
Yes, sir.
Packing material, let's start over again. Tell me again.
Yes, so it's frequently present in the wadding along with the pellets that sort of help keep them together.
Okay, so the wadding, you got the powder wadding shotgun pellets, and are these, is it in the pellets or is it closer behind it in the wadding or?
It's within the wadding.
Okay, and you indicated you saw some packing material.
Well, that is very consistent with, with a little bit of packing material that would, as we have pellets going into the shoulder and some of the packing materials depositing on the skin.
And is this a picture of the packing material?
There is some of the white material, yes, on the skin. Correct.
Did you note that in your autopsy report?
No, it was just a general observation.
Okay. Is it important it was there?
It didn't matter to me whether it's there or not, but it does reinforce that it is an entrance wound.
But you concede it was not in your autopsy report.
Well, all the totality of my findings, I don't always write every little thing in my autopsy report. I could go on, that it could be 50 pages, an autopsy report. I include the findings, my determinations, and I could have mentioned it, but I did not,
And why not?
because it's not always necessary to mention that kind of thing.
Is it evidence of anything?
Well, I do believe that supports an entrance wound, although I don't require myself to see it in order to make that determination.
But you agree with me, it supports your conclusion, correct?
Yes,
And you didn't put in your autopsy report.
that's correct.
Would it be in your notes?
No,
Okay. So, and could you step down here and show me what the packing material looks like? And there's a pointer right over there behind you. You probably want to stand over here so the jurors over there can see it.
yes. This is what I believe to be consistent with packing material.
And did you remove any of that to be analyzed or forensically examined?
No, I did not.
Okay, and while we're looking at this picture, you can actually see some shot in there, right?
Yes,
And that shot is that, I mean, that's pretty, that area right there is much wider than this entrance wound in his cheek, is it not?
yes, this entrance wound is larger than this re-entrance wound here. And I believe I actually went over this last time. Frequently, there's enlargement of wound as it goes along. But in this case, we have a wound going along the top of the shoulder, so it's going to be oblong. As it enters the left neck area, it's entering more at a right angle, perpendicular to the jaw, so it's going to appear smaller. And that has nothing to do with spreading of pellets.
Okay, well, let's pursue that a little bit more. You see that pellet that's clear, I mean, clearly there. You
This
see,
pellet?
right, and then you see a pellet above it. You see that? Right,
Yeah.
right. Let me put my glasses on. Is that a pellet?
Yeah, it may be a pellet. Yes.
Okay, so we have, if you step back just a little bit so this juror can see, we have pellets coming in like this, correct?
Well, they're kind of banging against each other. We have the wound track is from left to right, and we do have pellets that are in there. They didn't they stopped in there, so they're not all continuing through.
Okay, how many pellets were captured in his shoulder?
I captured, I don't know how many I captured. I collected a sampling of the pellets that were along the wound path.
But you took x-rays.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily the total amount, because some of them, exited somewhere in the brain. So the x-rays were taken without the brain in the head because the brain came separately.
Okay, but they did send you the brain.
Yes.
Did you take x-rays of the brain?
No, I did not.
Why not?
I didn't take x-rays of the brain
And the
because I
reason- oh, go ahead.
determined that wasn't necessary for me at the time.
To support your conclusion.
I didn't take x-rays of the brain. I guess hindsight is always 20/20. I could have taken x-rays of the brain. I could have taken more photos. I could have taken a photo of the brain at the autopsy. I did not. And I would have liked to, but I can tell from the examination of the body that I had an entrance wound on my left shoulder, and it's exiting at the top of the head. It's not a contact wound to the top of the head.
Okay.
That's my determination.
Okay, but the reason you didn't take x-rays of the brain was you'd already reached your conclusion, correct? That you didn't need it because this was an entrance wound.
Well, I did not, because I felt comfortable with my determination.
And decided therefore not to take x-rays of the brain.
Well, I don't always take x-rays of every organ. I was comfortable I would be able to recover some pellets on the brain, and it wasn't necessary to show the spread.
How many cases have you been involved in where the brain literally exploded out of the head? I mean, that weren't suicides.
Where the brain exploded out of the head.
Well, as the book describes it,
Well, I think that the determination that an entrance wound to the top of the head, contact range, all of that gas expansion would not have, the brain would not have escaped that. There would have been a defect, cavity, or fragmentation of the brain, which was not there. You can see the brain actually.
do you remember what my original question was?
What was your question?
Okay, my question was, how many cases have you done an autopsy of a contact wound to the top of the head, which wasn't a suicide?
Very, very few.
Less than one?
I don't remember exactly, but it's not a tip. Usually contact shotgun wounds. Usually contact shotgun wounds are suicides.
And typically it's in the mouth.
They can be under the chin, in the mouth, sometimes they're to the side of the head. There are people that do shoot themselves onto the top of the head as well. And I can't recall exactly if, I remember any of those.
And in all those cases, the brain that explode out of the cranium?
No.
Okay. So you would agree with me that the way that well, strike that. Let's go a little bit further with where we're going here. Could you put up the X-ray of the shoulder? You can go ahead and take your seat and testify from up there. Can you tell us what this is?
Yes, they are pellets, and I have his shoulder, kind of out when I take the wound. We have some pellets remaining in the shoulder area. We have some disruption of the shoulder tissue here, some of the bone, and then we have some. We actually have less. We have more spread. They're more spread out as they're going closer to the neck.
So there are pellets in the top of the arm, the shoulder. Where is this? Right up in here?
Yes.
Okay. And then there's additional pellets, it looks like, down below that, like near his ribs, correct?
That's because it's starting to spread. Yes.
And it's starting to spread to get to this place right here.
What place?
Is this where
No, it's in the neck.
it's in the neck. Okay.
I indicated that I recovered. It's over here. Then some of it is actually in the trachea as well. So that's the windpipe of the neck. So we have some in the neck. This is the chest area. It did not go into the chest.
Okay. Let me see another X-ray, please. What was that exhibit? I'm sorry, I didn't announce it. 112. Okay, let me see the next X-ray. Okay, and where is that?
That is the top of the left shoulder and the left arm.
Okay. And you see a number of pellets there.
Yes,
That would be right in this area right here?
yes.
Okay. Next, there's, I think, one more X-ray. Okay, and are there any pellets here? Or are those the same pellets down there at the bottom?
Yeah, well,
see-
you can see, there are pellets here. We can see them in the head. There's some pellets in the head. The brain is not within the cranial cavity, but we do see some of the pellets ended up over here on the right side. See, R for right. There's the hole at the top of the head, and some of the pellets they're spread out on the right side of the head.
How many?
Well, I can see there's 3 here.
3?
On the right side of the head.
Okay.
Yes.
So if well, how many pellets are there in a 12 gauge shotgun shell? And these are used primarily for duck hunting.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I'm an expert at examining human bodies and determining the injuries that occurred. And, I don't know how many pellets would be. When I took my boards, I may have had to actually know that, but I don't use this information in order. You can ask your ballistics expert.
Well, we did. And I think they said something like between,
Objection, Your Honor.
I don't really know the answer to that. I'm not going to disagree with the ballistics expert. I do have a trajectory an exit wound on the right side of the back of the head.
how many pellets were in the body? Left
I
in the
did
body?
not count them. I just collect a representative sample of it. I don't collect all of them, and I don't count all of them.
And we know you don't know how many were in the brain because you didn't x-ray the brain, correct?
That's correct.
But if there were 70 pellets or 75 pellets in his shoulder, his chest, and his neck, and hypothetically, there are anywhere between 135 and 160 pellets in the normal duck shot, that's 40 pellets that travel on, for the sake of argument, correct?
Well,
My math,
I don't
use
really,
my math.
I don't feel comfortable answering these questions because it's not, the specific ballistics are not my area of expertise.
I'm not going to ask you about
I really don't
ballistics.
feel comfortable answering them. I
Just-
examine human bodies and come to my determinations based on the wounds. And I can see I was correct that this is a shotgun wound to the left shoulder that's going up to the right side of the head. And questions about numbers I really don't want to I can't answer that because, I don't know everything. I'm an expert. I'm a physician. I'm an expert at examining human deceased individuals, determining cause and manner of death.
Okay, let's go back to the original question, and I assume.
I don't know the answer to the shotgun, how many pellets there would be.
We're not asking you how many pellets, but if there's 75 pellets, let's do some math here. This is simple math.
Okay, I can do math.
Okay, 75 pellets we can count in the body, the chest, the neck. And there's anywhere from 135 to 165 pellets in the normal duck shot, 12 gauge shot.
Right, so 75 plus 60, that would be 135. And then what did you say, 70 or 80?
75.
Okay, 75. So we started with 75 plus 75 is 150. So that's your answer. If your question is, you're asking me to do the math.
So my question is this. After those pellets have gone through the shoulder and hit bone, apparently, correct?
Yes.
And then they go through the neck. Do they hit more bone there?
There was some damage to the cartilage of the trachea. It was in the tracheal wall and some muscle. There's not a lot of bone in the neck. The only bone really in the neck
Right.
is the spinal column.
Well, I guess what I'm saying, when you were talking about Maggie a moment ago, and you talked about a shot that I think grazed her skull, you said there was a lot of intracranial pressure. Is that right? Created a lot of intracranial pressure.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm trying to figure out, and maybe you can help me. Your testimony is there was enough from the less than half the load that goes through to, was it one place it hit? Was it had to go through the brain still?
Yeah. Well, I didn't say that less than half the load went through. Some of it may have actually exited the top of the head. I don't know. Or went into the brain. I did not x-ray the brain. And so I don't know exactly how many, but we can tell that this is the direction.
Was the brain macerated?
No, it was largely intact. There was some maceration at the base of the brain where it was torn from the brainstem. Okay, the brain went up and torn from the brainstem, but it was pretty much surprisingly intact, from a shotgun wound.
Have you looked at the crime scene photos?
I really didn't look at the crime scene photos with any kind of, attention.
Okay, so, but you are aware that the brain was catapulted out of his head, probably hit the ceiling and then landed outside.
Well, I could tell from examining the body that the brain catapulted out of the head because I
Okay.
received the brain and a hole that was consistent with the brain leaving it.
Can you and I agree, and based on your testimony when you previously testified, that there would not be, that the gas from 2 or 3 feet away would not travel through the arm, travel through the neck, and then go into the brain?
Well,
And
there's a lot of material that's going through, and plus we've got fragments of the brain, the skull, of the base of the brain that can also, there's a lot of energy going in that direction. Whether it's gas or not, it's energy from portions of ammunition propelling in that direction. So, whether you want to call it gas or whether it's other thing, I really don't know the theoretical explanation. I'm sure it's in the book.
It
But I
is.
examine the bodies and I make the determination on the direction and the type of injury from examining the human body.
The book seems to indicate that the primary cause for an explosion such as this, the brain exploding out, is the gas. You would agree?
Well, I think each case is a little bit different. And the kind of gas that would cause the head to explode would also, I mean, I think the book is talking about gas, gas in a contact shotgun wound. So what is your question about the book? I would actually have to refresh my recollection
Well,
because I don't really I haven't read the book in a long time, but I know what I've seen on the body.
If I quote this to you, you would, and I can show it to you. The gas entering the closed chamber of the head expands rapidly, adding to the pressure waves acting on the bony framework of the skull. The only way for the skull to relieve the pressure produced is to shatter. Do
Yes.
you agree with that?
That actually must be describing a contact shotgun
It is.
wound. Okay, yeah, because that really makes sense for a contact shotgun wound.
And your reasoning for this, the same phenomenon that happened without the gas is?
Well, we've got injury coming from beneath. The skull is, like I told the jury, that is not shattered. We do have some horrible injury, but the shattering of the skull, much of it is still up intact. We don't have shattering of every bone. We don't have shattering of the face. So
Why didn't you shave the head?
why didn't I shave the
Right, were
head?
you looking for any, if much of the skull is still there?
Look, my determination, I didn't shave the head because I was confident that that was an exit wound on the right side of the top of the head. It wasn't necessary for me to shave an exit wound.
So, but if you had shaved the head, and again, apparently you'd already come to your opinion by this point, you could have seen whether it was soot or stippling or any distortion around, or taken samples of the hair and determine whether or not there was any sort of GSR in it, which would be more consistent with a contact wound.
Well, no, GSR can just be we know gunshot residue can deposit in, I'm not like ballistics is not necessarily my strongest suit, but I know that GSR can deposit, within a few feet. Somebody doesn't have to indicate a contact wound.
Okay, so did the shot penetrate the jawbone?
It went through through that area. I believe it actually may have went underneath the bone.
So it did not connect with the bone? Correct?
Yes.
Are any of the pellets that you see in the shoulder, the left shoulder, heading down instead of up?
Well, there's probably kind of a billiard ball effect when these things are going through, and there could be some, directionality but I didn't make that determination because it wasn't important to me to
See
make
which
that
way the pellets were
determination.
going?
What?
To determine which way some of the pellets were
Yeah.
heading?
I can tell from the entirety of my finding at the autopsy.
Okay,
The thing is, if you look at something like, a postcard photograph, that doesn't necessarily tell you the whole story. I did my autopsy. I viewed all of the wounds. I was confident in the direction of this wound path. And I'm not trying to say, oh, well, which direction are the pellets going? I can see that there's the entrance wound was to the top of the left shoulder, went through the left side of the neck and out the top of the head.
And how many pellets made it through the brain to the skull? To fracture the skull? How many pellets?
Oh, well, there were some pellets in the brain. I don't know how many.
Because you didn't x-ray it.
Correct.
So since you don't count the number of pellets, tell the jury, please, how you know how many pellets hit the skull and fractured it and allowed this eruption to occur.
I don't know how many pellets. I never said that I did.
No, I didn't say you said it. I just want to know if you know it.
I don't know the answer to that.
And it's not important to you.
It doesn't really matter. It's really very theoretical. I examined the bodies and I made my determination based on examination of the body.
Is it true that an autopsy report should be able to be read by an independent pathologist to come to a conclusion?
Yes.
Okay. Are you ready? Okay, how about put that up for us, please?
Noises,
I'm sorry, sir?
some strange noises. Who's talking? You're questioning the witness? Proceed.
I'm asking Doug to put up exhibit number.
I didn't hear you talking. I heard
Oh, I'm
you were
sorry.
questioning the witness and
I
then a
may have
strange
mumbled.
voice
I
coming from.
apologize. What's the exhibit number?
State 487.
Okay. So, how about step down here, please? And get the pointer for me, please. And stand over there, please, so the jury can see. So you indicated there were, I asked you if you shaved the head. You said no. You said there wasn't, I think your words were there was enough of the skull there to determine what happened. Is there?
Well, I know this is an exit wound from examining the entirety of the findings, and I did not need to shave the hair.
From the
That was my opinion and determination at the time of the autopsy.
Yes, ma'am, we understand that, but what, did you look at this to confirm or question your opinion, or have you already come to your opinion?
Well, I always am questioning it myself during the autopsy. It's not just, I look at take a long time to look at everything before I reach a conclusion. Okay, so the totality of findings here told me this was an exit wound. The brain came pretty much intact. It was propelled out at the top of the head. I believe and I'm confident that this is an exit wound, and I did not do further investigation to rule out an entrance wound because I was confident it was not.
So you just said you were confident and you did not look further because you were confident you were right.
Well, I looked at it, and in fact, I took a photograph of it, and this is consistent with an exit.
It's what?
Consistent with an exit wound. The brain came out of that defect. If it were a shotgun entrance wound, there would be a lot more destruction of the head.
And again, you've never seen a contact wound to the head that wasn't in a suicide case.
I don't honestly remember that.
So you don't remember, let me just rephrase, you don't remember having a case involving a contact wound to the head that wasn't a suicide case. You just don't remember it.
I may have, it's possible I did not survey, I may have seen one where somebody was shot at point blank range with a shotgun, and then the entire head is gone. So when I get that kind of if there was a contact shotgun, whether it's suicide or homicide, the entire head would have been basically blown off.
And so in every case, there's no reason for us to go there because you don't remember ever seeing a case where there was a contact wound and to the back of the head.
Objection asked.
I think it's honestly, whether it's self-inflicted or inflicted by somebody else.
Well-
The features of the body are going to be the same. So that's my answer. And I
Okay.
can't, whether I remember it or not, I've done a lot of autopsies. I don't necessarily remember how many or if I've done one, but I imagine people are shot at close or contact range with a shotgun. And in a contact shotgun, whether it's by suicide or homicide, the entire head would have been basically blown apart. This is terrible. And I know it's terrible. It's probably the worst thing you ever saw, but there would be a lot more damage with a contact shotgun. And that's my professional opinion based on my experience. If other people disagree with me, that's fine. I don't have to convince them. This is my determination based on my education and multiple years of experience doing autopsies and being a forensic pathologist.
And I think in your testimony, whenever that was, weeks ago, you conceded that reasonable pathologists can differ, correct?
Yes, I think I said, you asked me if a reasonable person, you didn't actually ask me if a reasonable pathologist, you asked me if a reasonable person could have a different opinion. And I remember that because I was sorry that I didn't say, well, of course, reasonable people can think that, but a reasonable pathologist could also think that, but I would disagree with that.
Okay.
I don't think all opinions, a reasonable pathologist could have an opinion like that, but I think it would really be wrong.
Okay. You go ahead and take the stand, please. Have you discussed, you met and discussed with Dr. Kinsey, Kenny Kinsey, about his findings?
I did meet with him once when a couple of weeks prior to the autopsy, I really never, prior to this trial, I met with the prosecution's team. And I would have been available to meet with you if you called me as well. But Ken Kinsey was responsible for the crime scene. What he had to say was, I really wasn't, I already written my autopsy report. I already came to my decision, my determinations based on my examination of the body. And whatever it was, he's going to do the crime scene. So I don't remember having any specific conversation.
You don't remember talking to him about vectors and where the blood spatter would have gone? And
yeah. Well, he asked me, he said, do you know anything about this? And I said, that's your department. I really am not a blood spatter expert. So I had nothing to offer. And I really didn't encourage listening to it because it's not my area.
And let me, say a couple things. One is, you indicated that you did not put that packing material in your autopsy report, correct?
Yes.
And today's the first time you've ever said anything about packing, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Secondly, let me just sort of summarize this and see if we can get this over with. There are certain things you did not do in this autopsy because you concluded it wouldn't be helpful in reaching your conclusion, correct?
I agree with that.
Like no x-ray of the brain.
I would have been, I did not x-ray the brain, right?
Okay. Your belief is that the shotgun wound to the shoulder being so much bigger is because of the angle?
Yes.
Okay, and then it narrows down to, you would concede as a hole in his neck.
Yes,
Okay. Shotgun starts out wider, that shot starts out wider. I think we confirm that.
the defect on the shoulder is
Right.
wider because it's kind of going across the shoulder. So it's going to create a defect on the shoulder that's wider than something entering at a right angle or perpendicular. So that's, and I think that makes sense to me. It's consistent with what I've seen in more than 20 years of my practice. And there wasn't anything that seemed odd about that.
And you would concede you're not a ballistics expert.
I know the kind of ballistics. Some forensic pathologists know a lot about ballistics. I know probably an average amount.
Okay, and so when you say it started out wider and then came down to this hole, have you discussed that with any ballistics experts?
It doesn't require, that's forensic pathology. That's damage to the body. I don't need to be a ballistics expert, and I've done enough autopsies on shotgun wounds to make that determination without requiring additional ballistics knowledge.
But we can see that the shotgun starts out, the shot starts small and then the pellets expand.
Objection asked and answered, Your Honor.
Objection sustained.
Why are there no shot, why there's no shot in his cheek if it's expanding? Why are there no pellet holes here?
Because they probably we have some wadding going in there.
Probably.
Yeah, I think that is consistent with the wadding. And there are, there's some pellets remaining in the wadding as well.
The wadding going where?
That's an entrance wound. Okay, it's entering perpendicularly. Why do we have, the pellets did not terminate in the cheek. They continued upward.
But a number of them terminated in the shoulder,
Yes,
in the chest, up here, right?
yes.
And then
Not
they-
the chest,
then
the
they
neck,
stop-
not the
I'm sorry?
chest. Not the chest, the neck.
But the neck, the shoulder and upper neck, right?
Yes.
And then, I mean, if they stop expanding here, so the cheek isn't, one of those pellets is,
Objection asked and answered to the former question.
Your Honor?
It's been asked and answered. I sustain the objection.
And you say these x-rays are consistent with your opinion?
Yes.
Beg the court's indulgence. Oh, let me ask you one question about the Maggie wound. Your position is that the tags don't indicate anything?
Well, they are not determinative. They are something we look at, but the tags on the breast are very non-specific. They're not very good tags. We happen to have nice tags on the back of the skull. Frequently, the tags are more reliable when the skin is tighter over an area.
So on Maggie, you're saying one shot's going up and the other one's going down?
Yes.
Okay. Beg the court's indulgence. Holly, anything else? Thank you, that's all I have. Thank you, doctor.
Just two questions. 5,500 autopsies, you said, correct?
Yes, and since I was here last Navy, I've done another dozen, so over 5,500.
And you rely on practical observations of actually observing the body, is that correct?
That's correct. I do my autopsies, and based on my experience and knowledge as a forensic pathologist, I know about the bodies, examining the bodies. That's what I rely on.
And your,
Other two questions, more.
have, just a couple more, Your Honor. In your opinion, is there any way Paul's face would have remained intact if he had suffered a contact wound from the top of the head?
No,
And in your opinion, is this obviously a wound in this direction as you've described?
Objection, Your Honor. Repetitive. She's testified 5 times. That's her opinion.
Objection is sustained.
Further on.
Thank you. Nothing
Further. Thank you, Ms. Steptown.
thank you.